All right. I think we're live. We're live over there. Okay. This is Andy again with Angel Water, trying to teach you guys a little bit about private wells and how important water testing is. And so today we're going to teach you all about owning a private well. And the source of the information that I'm going to share with you today is actually came from the EPA. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, actually published this report that helps private well owners completely understand what it's like to own a private well. So it is a little complicated. So I'm going to start out with the basics of where your water comes from and then how it enters the home and what to do as far as precautions so that you don't pollute your own private well. And we're going to do that basically for everybody here in the Chicagoland area. So again, for all of you who have a private well, you basically have to realize, according to the EPA, the CDC, the Department of Public Health, you are the water authority for your family. So that means you need to learn all you can from guys like me and or well drillers. How does your well work? How do you get water into your house, and how can you protect your own aquifer or your own water source so that you can have clean water? So the number one thing that you have to realize is that underneath our feet, about 200 feet down, in Port Barrington, it's only like 10 feet down, you have an aquifer. So basically the aquifer looks a little like this. You have the grass, you have soil, clay, and then usually an aquifer is really gravel under the Earth's crust. Now, just as a quick note, how did that get here? If you think about millions of years ago, the glaciers came down after an asteroid hit our planet. And basically, so you know, one did hit our planet right here in Chicagoland area. It left behind radium-228 and 226, and that's why that's the number one carcinogen that we're going to recommend that you test for in your water, because radium is trying to get back up to the atmosphere, and as it actually travels through the aquifer, it takes on it attaches itself to the water, to the aquifer. Also, as the radium transfers up, trying to get out back to the atmosphere, it will hit the bottom of your basement. And so this is why when you go to sell your home, you're required, not really required, but you are suggested strongly to test for radium-222. That's the airborne level of radium. And what happens is, as the radium hits the basement of your house, it finds a crack, gets into the basement of the home, and then because that basement typically doesn't have windows, it builds up in there. And that radium-222 can cause cancer, lung cancer. In water, however, it can also cause cancer, and it's the number one contaminant throughout Chicagoland, whether or not you're on Lake Michigan water or Barrington Village water. All these cities test positive and sometimes extremely high for radium. So you'll want to remember that that's one of the things that a good solid water softener or drinking water system or reverse osmosis system is going to take out of your water. So anyhow, this aquifer is your source of water. It actually is trillions of gallons of water. And thanks to Barrington area residents, the tax dollars that you've spent on BACOG, that's called Barrington Area Chamber of Commerce, Barrington Area Council of Governments, is that they studied the aquifer and they learned that aquifer actually is the source water for it is not only the water that falls on the grass of your house and percolates through, but it also comes from the Fox River Valley. So as the water in the Fox River Valley hits the river along with the rainfall, it percolates to the earth and hits a granite shale underneath our feet, about 200 feet down, and it travels southeast under the homes that are east of the Fox River. So it's kind of important to understand that where your water comes from, because you want to understand that your water isn't really necessarily the water that fell on the land outside your house and then collected underneath your house. It's actually part of a very large aquifer that migrates southeast under your home. So as that water travels southeast under your home, we want to highlight to you that you have to be very, very careful with what you put on your own lawn and your grass, and you want to think about, well, listen, what's northwest of me? Well, it could be industry, it could be a whole lot of different things that can actually pollute the earth. So I've gone ahead and made this little diagram here for everybody. And so you can sort of see that according to the EPA, if this is your aquifer down here, your own personal septic tank can contaminate your well. This is why the Department of Health says you should test for coliform, and that's the waste, your own septic waste, or from livestock waste. It can get into your water every year. Sometimes some agencies actually recommend testing for coliform 3 times a year because the aquifers are ever changing. The other things that can get into the aquifer is pesticides and herbicides. Landfills, up in Wauconda, there's a toxic landfill that's off of Bonner Road. It contaminated the aquifers up there with vinyl chloride. So you want to sort of know what's in your marketplace because it can eventually get into the drinking water. Also, industry. Industry is well known up in McCollum Lake. There's a company up there that contaminated the aquifers and people got brain cancer from that, and they didn't even know, and nor did they test their water. So what we want you to understand is that your aquifer is the most natural, precious resource that you could possibly ask for. A lot of clients, when they hear that, oh my God, all these things that can get in my water, I should have never moved from Chicago water and I should not have a private well. And I'm here to tell you that in almost every case that we've tested well water, it is substantially cleaner than Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is a gigantic hole in the ground. And man actually pays permits like BP Amoco and a lot of other companies in industries pay permits to dump their toxic waste into it. In addition to that, there are coal-fired power plants that surround Lake Michigan. So the waste from the coal-fired power plants, which is mercury, gets into the water. So as much as when people start to learn about the things that can contaminate their own private well, and they start thinking that Lake Michigan water is safer, it's arguably that it's not true. Owning your own well is natural, precious resource, as I mentioned. And what we found is that the aquifers are very strong and they should last for 20, 30 years without any problems whatsoever. We have had a couple droughts, and those droughts actually make that water table drop, and some people have to drill new wells. But in general cases, we've had, this business has been around since 1972. We've had all of our well owners have ample supply of water and no problems with it whatsoever. We do have about 10% of the wells that have some sort of contaminant that gets in the water. So that's part of this education form as well, as we're trying to explain to you that it's your duty as the water authority for your family or your household that you do an annual water test. You want to understand what if there's any chemicals in your water, any pesticides, any herbicides. In fact, this document, which you can get from us, at Angel Water. This document is a great EPA document. On page 5, 6, and 7, it highlights the things that you should be tested for in your water. There's about 30 or 40 different contaminants that they strongly suggest you test for so you know what's in your water. And if you've seen some of my other videos where we talk about why NSF certification, what's the right filter for your water, this on a private well dictates to you what's in your water, and then you can hire a water treatment company like mine to make sure that we take that contaminant out. And we would want to use an NSF certified product to take that contaminant out. But if you never do the water test, then there's no way for us to know what's in your water and what's not in your water. And this is why our company prefers to use very high quality products that are NSF certified and made in America versus the cheap Chinese stuff, because they're not certified to take out pesticides and herbicides, radium, vinyl chloride. It's questionable whether or not it will work. So that's, again, one of the real good reasons why, especially for people on a well, we want, or if it was me, I'd want to invest into a higher quality product just to make sure that if something popped one day, like pesticides in my water, I had a very, very good drinking water system that is assuring me the safest water possible. Getting back to your well, though, I want to show you what your well sort of looks like. Here's a rough drawing of a private well, and this is the outside of your house, and this is actually called the well cap. So it usually sticks out and should be 18 inches above the grass line. The reason why that's important is because as rain falls, we don't want animal waste that could be sitting on the grass to overflow and get into the top of this lid, because this cover is actually a vented cover. So it allows air to go back and forth through this chamber, this long tube. Now your tubes outside could either be made of steel, which were done before 1982. They were made of steel. If you have one of those, you do want to make sure you test for lead every year, because if your well casing is steel, they used solder that had lead in it. We've had many customers, especially in up near Biltmore Country Club, that actually found lead in their water. So check to see what this casing right here is made out of. It's either PVC or steel. Again, if it's steel, get your water tested. If you follow the EPA test, you're going to check for lead every year. But at a very minimum, you want to make sure you check for lead if your casing is steel. Again, that casing is drilled down into the earth about 200 feet in order to tap the aquifer. Now, when you have to remember that you have 220 volts of electricity going to that well casing too, so it's not something we recommend that you open. The EPA does, and the Department of Public Health recommends strongly that you use a well contractor like Peter Snelton and Sons, because they really understand this, and that can, if you open this up, there's live wires in there, and we've seen people get really, really hurt from that. So I would urge you to have, if you have any concerns about this well casing, or before you take it apart, I would suggest having a professional come out and do that. Now, some of the things that can go wrong with this is that because it's a vented cap and because it's warm, if it's made of PVC and in fact some cases steel, a lawnmower can actually hit the casing, crack it, and animals can crawl in. Now they crawl in because in the wintertime it's very cold outside. They find the warmth that's actually coming up through the earth, and so they'll build a nest in there. Something will happen to them, either their waste or they themselves die, and they fall down into your drinking water system. This is how people get violently sick, and this happens to a lot of our customers. So it's imperative that every year you keep inspecting this well casing. Our water treatment educators, our water educators, our service technicians, they come out to your house and they will be checking this for you if you were to have us out of your house. If you don't, then you do want to make sure that you're inspecting this on a regular basis. I do recommend clients put big boulders around this. That way, if you have landscapers, they know not to drive by, or if you have a young kid, like when I was a kid driving a lawnmower, I wouldn't have trusted myself. You want to make sure that they stay far away from that. So again, this well casing is very, very important for you to understand that this is the source of your fresh water. Also, one thing that you want to know is you shouldn't fertilize within 30 feet of this well cap. The EPA in this document is going to tell you that when you have landscapers come to your house, make sure you tell them to stay away 30 feet, because it is a vented cap, which means rainfall can aerate that pesticides and herbicides and actually get that into your drinking water system. So again, the more you keep away from this well cap, the better off that you are. Again, it should be 18 inches up. Now, in the event that if your well casing or your landscape is somewhat, get this, if your land comes down like this, you have to remember that actually is going to cause a problem, because this could literally get underwater. It's extremely important you don't allow that to get underwater. And it's extremely important that if it's very low to the ground, you ask a well company to raise it to 18 inches. Because what can happen is rainfall can fall over and get into the top of that cap because it's vented. So please remember that you should inspect that well cap area, make sure it's free of pesticides and herbicides, make sure the well casing is 18 inches, but the cap is 18 inches off the ground, and protect it from any flooding that can occur. If flooding did occur, do not drink your water. Absolutely do not drink your water. Have it tested. You must have it tested. And either Peter Snelton can help you, or you can learn how to chlorinate your own well. It's very, very important to understand that. Especially in the springtime right now, we're getting all this rainfall. So with all that rainfall, you want to remember that aquifers are changing drastically. This is why we actually did this video right now, is because the springtime is the best time to do a well water test. The EPA says this is the most ideal time for people to get this water tested, because your aquifers have changed. And because they have changed, we want to know what they've changed to. Now, I know when everyone bought a home, they bought the house and it had to have a water test, and everyone tells me, oh, there's only 2 things they had to test for. Why are you telling me that we have to test for 30 or 40 different things? You have to remember that the Department of Public Health, who has a little bit of control over your well, when you transact a house from one homeowner to another, the only thing they're checking on is to see whether or not the septic field or the septic tank, actually, which is on the next page here. Forgive me. They are checking to make sure if the septic tank actually cross-contaminated and affected your private well. And they're looking for nitrates to see if that nitrates got into your water. 2 things. It's not a lot, it's only 2 things. The EPA has 40 things. And the reason why is that your coliform or E. coli can make a child or an elderly person or someone with an immune system that's depleted, can get them violently sick and they could pass away quickly from it. So that's the reason why those are the only 2 things that when you transact a house from one homeowner to another, to check in for that very, very scary contaminant. And by the way, it's the most common contaminant. Now, all the other contaminants are something that if you're exposed to for a long time can cause cancer. So that's, radium 228, 226. It's lead. It's pesticides and herbicides. They're not going to cause you to get sick and die immediately, where coliform nitrates would be. So that's why when you transact a house, they only tested when you bought the home for coliform and nitrates. That's why this document is very important, because so many well owners have the misconception that, oh, when I bought my house, it passed the test, everything's fine. That's not true. The aquifer is always changing, number 1. Number 2, they only tested for 2 items. So you want to make sure that you test for like 30, what's on page 5, 6, and 7 in here, like almost 30 items every year. It's really important to check for those things. So I want to get back into how this all works. So within 30, as a reminder, we don't want to fertilize within 30 feet. We're going to make sure that law casing's in a good shape. This is drilled about 200 feet under the ground, tapping an aquifer. Now that aquifer, as I was explaining earlier, is just a layer of bedrock that when that asteroid hit our planet over 1 million years ago, the glaciers came from the North Pole. They brought with it all this gravel that's underneath our feet. And when finally the Earth started warming up, those glaciers retracted, and what was left is all this level of gravel. And what happened is over 1 million years, the Earth had clay and soil and dirt, everything started, trees and everything, grass and all these things started growing and dying. And what we did is we've now built up this layer of clay and soil above that layer of gravel. So that gravel is porous. So as water percolates through the soil and clay, it eventually gets to that layer of gravel and it becomes a gigantic aquifer, a gigantic ocean of water. And because it is an ocean, I want to remind you that it's ever changing. Even the barometric pressure, that's the moon's pull on the Earth, it will not only makes tides go up and down, but it also makes your aquifer go up and down. So as that aquifer goes up and down, it will touch more and more organic matter or sometimes contaminants. So that's, again, a big reason why you have to understand that your aquifer is ever changing. It's never going to be one quality. This is why the EPA and the CDC and the Department of Health says test your water regularly. It's very, very important. That said, when you have this hole drilled outside your house, they put it inside a metal or PVC 6-inch, usually I think it's about a 6-inch pipe. And in that pipe, they'll have both the water line that brings the water in. Usually it's a 1-inch water line. And they'll also have a 220 volts of electricity running down to that pump. The pump is a cylinder pump, so it's only about this long and it's pretty tall. And it grabs the water from this aquifer and pumps it up through a pipe and into the pressure tank of your house. So again, it's basically forcing water up this pipe and into the pressure tank of your house. And again, this is the basement of the home. So I did another drawing here for a second. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more zoomed in look as to what that looks like inside the house, or inside the house. So inside your house, if that water comes in, you'll have that electricity there too. There's going to be a gray box next to the pressure tank in your house. That gray box houses 220 volts of electricity. So again, it's something we really don't recommend you play with. It is how you adjust the pressure in this tank so they can raise or lower the pressure of your water in the at the faucet. But again, it's something I really recommend that you have a professional come out and adjust. Angel Water will not adjust that. That should be done by a well contractor. In any regard, that water comes in and it comes into the bottom of the pressure tank. The bottom of the pressure tank is actually water. The top is air. So what happens is as that pump turns on, forcing water into this pressure tank, it fills it up. And as that pressure gets greater up here, once it gets to a level of 60 psi, 60 or 70 psi, the switch tells that pump to turn off. The pump in the earth is usually, almost all the private wells, have a single speed pump. A 3/4 horsepower pump does about 9 gallons a minute. A horse and a half does somewhere around 14 gallons a minute. So at, let's call it 9 gallons a minute, it's going to fill up this tank. And again, when that pressure gets to 60 psi, it's going to tell the pump to turn off. Then as we use water in the home, and you turn on a faucet, it's going to start the bladder. There's a little rubber bladder here. The bladder and the air behind it is going to be pushing the water to your faucet. Keep in mind that that pump is not on. So the bladder simply pushes the water up into the home. And as you're using it, the minute that water pressure then drops to 40 psi, that then tells the switch to turn on, which gives that pump power. So then it starts throwing water into this tank here again and runs it through the home. So that's why sometimes when you're using water on a private well, you'll see the water pressure coming out of the faucet get stronger and lighter, stronger and lighter. So that's all that is that's your pressure tank turning, or your pressure gauge turning on and off the pump that's outside. Now, it's important that you take a look at this every year to make sure that pressure gauge or that pressure switch slowly goes down as you use water and slowly rises when you use water. Because these bladder tanks do break every, say, 8 to 10 years. So when they break, the pressure switch will literally turn on and off, on and off, on and off. That's called short cycling. You really, really don't want to have a short cycling system because in the earth, the pump is turning on and off, on and off. And what happens is that ruins your aquifer. We have a lot of clients who have sand in the water because they left that going for a year. The pump was off and on and off and on, and it aggravated the aquifer so much that they got sand in their water, and it was very, very expensive for them to fix. So again, this is another strong reason why you should have either our company out or a well contractor out once a year. It's because we'll check that for you if you don't understand that. Basically, we just run water. We watch that gauge go down. It should go down at a very, very slow pace, and then it should go up on a very slow pace. Usually, we can do a calculation on that just to see if it's 3/4 horsepower and how many fixtures in the house. We get a rough idea of how fast it should turn on and off. But it's very, very important that if you see it bouncing up and down, you need to be able to call a well company right away because your pressure switch or your pressure gauge is off. So that's basically it on how that works, that pressure switch and the water pump that we have in the earth. Again, this is what stands underneath our feet is about under 200 feet underneath where we stand is an aquifer. That aquifer is like an ocean of water. It's forever changing. This is why we start talking about the importance of testing that water on a regular basis. If you'd like to get a copy of this EPA document so you can learn more, please give us a call at 847-382-7800 or send us an email, info@angelwater.com. You can also read a lot about both our aquifers and water testing on our website, which is angelwater.com. And again, we have great water educators that are happy to come out to your house at any time, teach you all about the aquifers and how your well system works. It's done at no charge. We just want to be able to teach all of our neighbors how to be good stewards of their water. So please give us a call at any time. And again, I'm Andrew Wilson, and thank you for joining us on this Education 101 video on owning a private well. Have a great day.